Yeah, I kept on trying to butt in and then nobody let me talk, and I was like, why are they being so mean?
We tell you it wasn't personal, but that would be a lie. Hosting and bandwidth provided by the Blue Box Group. Check them out at bluebox.net. This episode is sponsored by Component One, makers of Widgmo. If you need stunning UI elements or awesome graphs and charts, then go to widgmo.com and check them out. Don't panic, they'll be paid for most of us. Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 89 of the JavaScript Jabber Show. This week on our panel we have AJ O'Neill.
Coming at you from the present.
Jameson Dance.
Hey friends.
Joe Eames.
Hey everybody.
I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv, and this week we have a special guest, and that's Adam Baldwin.
Hey.
Do you want to introduce yourself since you're new to the show?
Sure. I'm Adam Baldwin. I'm team lead at Lyft Security, and I'm the founder and organizer of the Node Security Project.
Awesome. So is Node a not secure system?
It's...
Oh, geez. Starting off with the hammers.
The hard one, right, yeah. Well, it's got its problems just like every other platform, right? It enables us to write software, and as humans, we tend to write perfect software, right?
Of course.
So,
yes.
Bug-free. Mine, right?
Yeah, bug-free. So I think that, that answers it. It has all the same issues as every other web platform out there, every other development environment.
So how are people doing it wrong then?
So in Node, we have a lot of front-end JavaScripters that are becoming back-end developers right now. They're being sucked into Node, and I know JavaScript, so I'm now doing things on the server, and they're they're confronting a whole new class of vulnerability that they've never had to deal with on the front end. Those are the things that I'm seeing from JavaScripters that are used to the front end.
Do you think you could maybe talk about what the Node Security Project is a little bit, just to give us an intro first?
Sure. The Node Security Project is a community effort that I sort of started to
for the fame and the money and the power.
Right.
First.
Right. I had to, yeah.
Why else do people do open source?
Fame and money. It's basically to evangelize security. I mean, that's all I talk about is security, security, security. And I wanted to, was getting more into the Node community. At Angiet, we had started building a product, and basically I had to figure out what all the security issues were with Node in the community. And so as I got more involved, I sort of noticed the need to evangelize security. So we started this project to evangelize security and sort of, help the community out there. But we also started it to audit the modules being published to NPM so that we can sort of, fix things as we find them, raise awareness around those type of things.
So is your background in security or in Node?
Yeah, my background is sort of all of the above. I've done development, I've done systems administration, I've done network ops, and I've done a lot of security work. So cool. I sort of have a multi hat, and I sit kind of firmly straddled between the development world and the security world, two worlds that don't tend to play nice together.
Sure.
How did you end up with such a varied background?
Just sort of, I didn't come at it from a traditional, I didn't go to my career path in a traditional way. I sort of got in trouble when I was 15 for breaking into the admin side of a bulletin board system in the middle of nowhere, Minnesota. And from there, I was given a job opportunity, and it sort of led me down the trail of internet service providers, doing network ops and system administration and things like that. And I eventually got sick of that, ended up at Symantec, and then I left there to start my own firm, Ingenuity, and then eventually landed at Lyft here.
So part of what the Node Security Project is about, you said, is to audit all of the modules on NPM. Yep. That seems like a Sisyphean effort, right? You push the boulder up the hill and it rolls back down. Because it's just so much easier to write a module than it is to audit it for security problems. How are you trying to do that? Are you concentrating on popularity first, or how does that work?
I've been asked this question a lot, and it's sort of an effort to boil the ocean, right? When you look at it and when I say audit all the modules on NPM, people immediately go to look for all the things in all the things. And that's not possible. We can't sustain that growth, right? There's 50,000 modules on NPM. It's just impossible to keep up. What we can do, though, and after a lot of debate, we can take one approach, which is look for one pattern in all of the modules, and we can automate that. So we can say, let's do a manual analysis, and then we can automate finding that pattern, creating tickets, and letting humans sort out the false positives. So we can keep up that way, and we can sort of ratchet up the baseline of the community, right? We can say, we want to eliminate remote code execution via childprocess.exec, and we can get rid of that from the module base by catching it when modules are published, and sort of evangelizing those efforts. The other thing we can do is focus on those, heavily on those popular modules. We haven't, actually, gone about it that way. We've been sort of just focused on our toolkit and stuff, but we haven't done an audit of, like, say, the top 100. But that's in the sort of the docket to do.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. So it's more like it's kind of a call to action, like leading by example type of thing.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do, and it's basically just call out things and, evangelize where we can and send pull requests where we can. And, worst case, even if we fail miserably, we fix some vulnerabilities and got some people to be more aware of certain security issues.
So are you involved in security issues with Node itself, or are you mostly focusing on user land stuff?
I'm mostly focused on user land stuff, although I've talked to, many people in the core team about security issues, and I know that they're interested in shoring up sort of their procedures and things like that. I don't get really involved in core other than as a distribution channel for, hey, we've got this vulnerability, and I'll probably write a blog post on it or tweet about it and get people to understand, okay, we got this release, you really need to update those kind of things.
Sure.
Which we're working on.
Yeah. So there are a couple, Rails is the one I'm thinking of the most. It's a framework that has a very well-defined security policy. And it's a little bit of an apples to oranges thing, because you're looking at the entire ecosystem for a whole platform as opposed to one framework. Mm-hmm. But do you have any kind of like vulnerability disclosure thing where you expect people to email you privately, or are you all about public disclosure? So, how do you think bugs should be disclosed?
Okay, so yeah, you're definitely right that we've got sort of an apples to oranges comparison in terms of, Rails is a collection of opinions and has more surface area, right?
Yeah, and so the reason I mentioned Rails is because it's the security policy I'm the most familiar with.
Yeah, and we have sort of a big problem. So let me talk about core first. Core has a defined, it has a place where you can mail, email if you've got security bugs. They don't want them publicly put in there, right? Public disclosure issues, which is good. They have that baseline, but that hasn't been very well evangelized, and I don't think they've called it out enough. At least the last time I checked at NodeConf EU, the policy wasn't up on the main Node site, and the process is a little bit convoluted, defined, and we don't know what the timelines are for disclosure and resolve and things like that. And there's no expectation of communication and things like that. That isn't established yet, and we need to improve that. The thing is that the core team is aware of that, and I think is willing to improve on that. Now, when it comes to the third-party modules, we have a giant problem. With Rails, you've got all these things in one spot. You've got a place where you can email. It's a central source to talk about anything that's involved in sort of that community. With third-party modules, if there's no cohesive place to send those. So what we've kind of been doing is we've been a clearinghouse for that, if as sort of like notify the project and CC us, and we'll help deal with that through, if we can. We can probably do a better job of evangelizing that and publicizing that as well. But that's sort of the status of things right now, which is, I don't think, not as good as some other communities, and we can do better at that.
It's super exciting though, because it means there's lots of work to be done, right?
Yeah, it's not necessarily glamorous work, but it's certainly important work to do for the Node ecosystem.
So if someone wanted to get involved with it, what would they do? Especially if they're not someone with are you looking for people that have specific security backgrounds, or what could the average Node user do?
So the average node user right now, the way that could help is we're currently building some of our tool set. So as I said, I'm kind of planted in between development and security. I'm more security minded, and meaning that I develop really slowly. So I need help in building some of the tools, the API to store the data and deal with the data that we're pulling off of NPM as things are published. And so I need to help building some of those tools. That's where somebody could get started. And that's just on github.com/node security. All of the repos are up there. I have not done a good enough job sort of architecting and detailing out what needs to be done. But the API repo is where we're currently actively working in, and we can certainly guide somebody there to help out that's good at building web APIs. Now, that said, that's where the developer can step in. The goal, however, is to have anybody of a development background be able to step in and actually audit a particular issue, meaning so the workflow would work something like this. You log into the portal, you press button, receive work. So you press a button, you get a particular issue that we've identified as a hotspot. So something that's potentially vulnerable, but we're not sure. The person would then have a description that would describe what the vulnerability is, an example of vulnerable code, sort of teaching them about that particular issue. So it's like a Node School type lesson, nodeschool.io. And it's sort of a lesson like that, just not as interactive. And then they'd be presented with the details that we found as the hotspot. And so they'd be able to basically mark that as vulnerable or not vulnerable, and then it would be under review after that. So the intention is to have developers be able to do this, learn something from it, as well as contribute to the community.
That's pretty sweet. While you're talking about the place for a web developer to work on the API, I was just thinking, you better be really sure you write secure code, because otherwise you're going to get made fun of on the Twitters. You put some security bugs in the Node Security Project API.
Yeah, but guess what? We're humble. We know that software, people make mistakes, and security is not about not having vulnerabilities. It's about process, right? It's about, assessing, measuring, iterating, doing better, and learning from that. Like, it's not possible to be, 100% secure. It just doesn't happen. So
what is a good security process then?
So the Ember.js project, I think, has a good disclosure process. I don't know what it's emberjs.com/security. And I think they've got a decent, communication and sort of hybrid based on sort of a bunch of different, historical documents, some of the old, responsible disclosure policies and things like that. They've kind of mixed together that talks about here's where you should report it. Here's the communication expectation that you should have, and those kind of things. And I think that's a good model for an open source project to sort of follow. Certainly I'm not super familiar with the Rails actual disclosure process. I should probably read that and be familiar with that, but I don't have it, memorized. But Ember's the one I've been using to sort of point projects to, as I feel it's kind of seems to be a good effort.
So there were a couple security issues recently that I'm sort of familiar with. I was wondering if you could maybe talk about how they were handled and if there's anything that could have been improved in the way they were handled. Because I don't know all the grimy details and stuff. I don't mean to spill the dirt, but just how to improve things.
Sure.
One of them was the recent Node 10.21 release. It had some kind of HTTP vulnerability fix. Yeah. And they kind of didn't really say what it was. They just said hey, you should really update, and someday we'll tell you what it fixed.
Yes.
And the other one, I think a couple months ago, wasn't there a Connect vulnerability? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the details on those. So do you want to talk about those and talk about what good ways you kind of use them as examples to talk about?
Sure.
Ways to handle node security.
The Node Core one, I think, could have been handled better. So what it was is there's a denial service vulnerability in 0.10.20. I think 21.
21 was the fix.
Or no, 21 was this release contains a security fix. Yeah, so 21 contains a fix. And what happened was basically there was a security announcement, and it didn't have as much detail as basically it should have. It should have been, hey, I feel it should have been, hey, here's our release. Here's the details about the vulnerability. Go patch. The thing is what happened was that the tests were there to reproduce the condition, and the details in the notes were not. So immediately everyone says, well, the tests are there. I've got basically full disclosure right here. And I believe a Metasploit module was created for it pretty quickly. And I think it should have just been, well timed. We've got all our details. An announcement goes out to the security mailing list. The release goes out, and then you sort of people. It's an arms race at that point. But you have the security announcement list for a reason, right? There's a place where we can subscribe to get knowledge about those. An announcement could have gone out on that at the same time, giving all of the giving the details that talk about the impact of the vulnerability. They don't have to talk about how to exploit it. So that's an important piece too, is you want those releases to not create more vulnerability, but just give enough details that a business can make a decision about urgency in upgrading.
So you don't think that they should include the steps to reproduce the vulnerability?
Not in the initial release to reproduce it, but I think that should be, disclosed afterwards. That's just my opinion. People are going to reverse engineer that out of the code anyway. So it's kind of a, 6 to 1, half dozen the other.
Sure.
So that was the Node Core thing. I think that was kind of a lesson. There's a lot of heated sort of conversation on Twitter, if you can call it a conversation.
I don't think you can, but
about, just
lots of yelling.
Yeah, about like you should have done this better and whatever. And I think Core does a good job of sort of filtering out the BS there and taking the proper criticism to heart and working on future releases, right? And I think we don't have to reinvent the wheel. You got open source projects that have release processes that do this all the time and do it well, and we should just adopt that model and just continue with it. So there's that.
Sure.
One thing that I'm curious about, and this may be a little outside of this since you're kind of focused around the libraries that
Sure.
are there, but I wonder a little bit about, let's say that I have an application that has a security vulnerability that I discover. What process should I have around that for, disclosing and letting my users know and whatever?
I'm of the opinion, like if it's your product, your application, I'm of the opinion transparency is best. And especially with breaches or vulnerabilities, different people have different opinions on this. I vote for transparency and talking about, hey, we've updated things where we discovered a security vulnerability. We did the research. It was never exploited. If you can't determine that this particular issue was never exploited on your servers, you've got bigger problems in your operational procedures that you need to be able to ask those questions and understand how to tell if that was exploited or not. But I think transparency is the way to go there. Write a blog post, notify your users, but that's just me. I think that it wins over trust versus having a problem, getting exploited, not understanding that situation, then getting called out on it afterwards, basically getting busted for sort of keeping something a secret. I don't know. It's happened, and it usually gets uglier than just being straight up.
It's such a delicate issue. Because I feel like I can understand arguments from people that want to keep them very secret, but at the same time, it's kind of risky. Like, if people find out, they can feel betrayed. I feel like that's how I felt as a consumer when all the Sony stuff came out, where it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I was like, oh, man, like, these guys are jokes.
And the hard part is having a vulnerability is not a bad thing. And I mean, sure, in some sense it is, but not learning from that mistake. That's the sin that's worth paying attention to. And if you continue to have repeated offenses to a similar thing, that's more impacting to me as somebody who's using your service or your product, your software, than just having a single vulnerability, I think.
Do you think that security announcements should talk about how this came to be? Like, should they talk about systematic things like that, or should they just talk about the bug itself?
I'm not quite sure.
So in the Node Core example, you mentioned a better thing to do might have been to disclose the effect of the vulnerability so people could decide how important it was to spend their time upgrading. Should they do like a postmortem in that same place, or? I don't know. I don't
necessarily think in the same place, but I think that using those bugs are learning opportunities, right? And security bug is the same type of situation, just handled with a little bit sort of different delicacy. I think that a postmortem should be done on process. It doesn't have to necessarily be public unless there is some kind of large mistake, right? It can be done via mailing list. It can be done via the core team talking to one another. But I think a postmortem should be done if there is a large consensus that, yes, that was completely, effed up. Community, if there's community backlash on it, it definitely should be talked about. It should be transparent, and something should be done to either, fix it or whatever.
Sure. That makes sense.
That's just my thoughts.
So what kinds of things are you looking for generally when you audit or evaluate an NPM module?
So we started with, like I had mentioned, childprocess.exec. We were looking for untrusted user input put into childprocess.exec, which creates shell execution, right? That was the first one we looked for. And we found a surprising number of those, right? And now we've sort of moved on to things like regular expressions that are denial serviceable, cross-site scripting, so unsanitized variables and EJS templates or JADE templates, things like that.
What do you mean regular expression that's deny service? Blah, blah, blah.
Denial serviceable.
Yes.
So it's a type of attack called ReDOS, and I'm absolutely horrible at explaining it. It's where you basically have, I believe, the best way to describe it is when you have a large number of back, what they call it, back references, and I can post a link, but
you basically make it go into like a pathological case where it just spends forever processing the regex?
Right. It's basically the case where you've got like a whole bunch of and there's a specific situation. I can't remember the right wording, but there's probably a site. Oh yeah, OWASP link is probably better at explaining what it is. We can post that up there for the listeners here. But you end up getting stuck in a non-optimal pattern, and it sort of just takes super long time to resolve, right? And it'll eventually get there, but you use a lot of resources for basically one request, right? So things like route might have like a route handler that's you use regular expressions to set up for route matching or something. And you do a poor job of writing one of those, and you might be able to, with a single GET request, consume a lot of server load. So that's one example.
That's really interesting. I knew about that regexes could do that, but I guess I just never thought about using it to attack a server. And I mean, parsing strings is like the core of what lots of server stuff does, right? To route URLs to functions and stuff. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And usually it has to do with like, a lot of modules usually just say, hey, just give me a regex here and I'll do a thing. And so oftentimes we have a problem with that because like, oh, well, it's how you use it. So, well, we can't really do anything about that because we don't see the private applications that are using this building block. So, it's kind of frustrating, but.
So the basis of it is if you have a repeating group, that's where you can become vulnerable to this.
Right.
So if you don't have a group that has a repeater on it, then you probably don't have vulnerability to this. Is that accurate?
That is accurate from what I know. And there is Substack has a module called Safe Regex. It's not perfect, but it will, if you put a regex into it, it'll spit out basically if you've got, if it thinks you've got, if it's safe or not.
So that's something like JSLint could probably look for too, right?
Correct. I've got an ESLint, ECMAScript lint module or plugin that does that. I tried to patch JSHint and I got lost. So I didn't do that.
Are there common kinds of errors that you see at the app level, not at the module level? Or are you not really focused on those kinds of things?
Yeah, so those are the things I do during my day job, right, at Lyft.
So you're an expert on those things.
Well, that's basically what I do is we do penetration testing, right? So the common things are like the OWASP top 10, right? You link to OWASP. Those are the common things for a reason. Those are the things we see not just in Node land, but in, Rails and PHP and Python, Django, whatever. We see those mistakes being made, and those are the most common things out there. Cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, SQL injection, which is becoming less common in a lot of applications because they're not using SQL anymore. They're using, Mongo or some other, key value store or whatever. They've got their own injection problems. They're just different.
I'm a little curious, though. I mean, with PHP and Django and Rails and a lot of these others, I mean, we're talking about web languages and web frameworks here, but do you find that their maturity leads them to be maybe a little bit ahead of Node in some of these areas, or is Node mature enough now to have solved most of these problems as well?
I sort of go against the grain in the Node community that when I say that I don't think frameworks are bad. There's a common thread in Node where, small modules, do independent things, and I think that's good, and then we stay away from frameworks. But frameworks itself, you take a bunch of those modules, you put them together, you make these opinionated decisions for the end user. So I think that, and then those mature over time, right, with good security decisions. So I think that, Django and Rails, I think those are good things. I think that those it's not necessarily making them more mature than Node, but if you compare, say, Rails to Express, or, Rails to Sales.js or whatever, they've been around longer. And so hopefully these frameworks in Node can learn from Django and Python or Django and Rails and some of those. But, we're seeing the same type of issues crop up, and, that makes sense.
That does make sense. I feel like it is a little bit of an apples to oranges comparison. If you're talking about Node to Django,
yeah.
You could talk about Node to Python maybe. Like you write code for Node, you write code for Python. Node isn't really a web framework.
Right.
So, there were still some vulnerabilities there was a Ruby one a while ago. There's the Node one we talked about. So the core language can still have problems, but
that's the interesting thing is that the core, there was a vulnerability in core that response splitting, where you could get headers from the request or whatever output into the body, and that was in a core lib, but it's not really in the. It was in Node because it was in the core, but the core HTTP module could just as easily be broken out in the user land. So it's JavaScript is still the core language in Node. It's just kind of I don't know. It's an interesting apples to oranges sort of comparison. Like you have to sort of deal with.
You could argue that since the effort in Node seems to be more focused on people rolling their own things, there's less wood behind more arrows type of thing. I guess you could argue that might lead to more vulnerabilities in the specific frameworks.
I think rolling your own is typically, and that's the other, and you'd kind of mentioned that earlier, and I think that's another plus for frameworks is that not everyone's the right person to write an auth framework for their app or a cross-site request forgery token generator and dealing with all that. Those things have been written and done, and why not use one that somebody else has written? The problem that you have is that you're going to go to NPM and you're going to pick a module off the registry that maybe somebody else wrote that was also not the right person to write the thing. So, yeah.
So that becomes a question of curation where,
sure.
Does the number of stars on GitHub and the number of downloads per day mean that it is a good module, or does it mean that it was marketed well?
It means it was marketed well. Yeah. I don't think stars have shit to deal with when it comes to code quality.
So what do you think about some sort of effort of curating modules? For example, you take some really popular modules that everybody uses, kind of manually lint them for security errors and pull them into NPM-S or something like that.
So that was an interesting discussion I had early on with some of the Node Core people. Was that sort of anarchy in Node land is good in terms of best module wins, but I think that we can land as the Node security project some metadata to that decision. The thing is I'd rather see that solved. I don't want to maintain a sort of moderated list of modules to use because it's so subjective for the use case that you're going to use them, I guess. And I'd rather see somebody else, because a maintainer falls off and stops maintaining something. Well, then another module is going to come in and take its place, and it's just a giant bear to wait weight to bear for curating those things. I think community pretty much sorts it out, but it is a problem, and I don't know if is actually a solution.
So that kind of leads me to another question, because you find a security issue in a library and you send pull requests and you do some disclosure and things so people know about it. What do you do if you can't get the maintainer to actually fix it? So, for example, they have disappeared, or they're busy, or they just kind of abandoned the project or whatever.
Or they hate you.
Or they
hate you.
I've been
or they're the NSA and they want it to
already.
be vulnerable.
Right.
Yeah, there are people that do not like the Node Security Project, and I will not call them out by name, but they are very, very prominent in the Node community.
What are their objections to it?
And they say that it actually creates more vulnerability by doing disclosures and things like that.
Isn't that kind of the age-old battle in security?
Yeah, it is. And so basically, so to answer that is, we do not release an advisory about a module without a patch. So if we haven't run into that situation yet, but let's say it was something extremely serious in a popular framework, right? Let's say it's a popular web framework. We found something very serious, and the maintainer just basically gave us a finger and said, no, I'm not going to fix it. Let's say, we could remotely execute code on a server or something. If it was very serious, I feel that it would get enough publicity to force the issue in the community to make a decision to either force push on their project, which would be a political nightmare. But I think that would be a situation that may occur. The other thing is if we release an advisory, we'd at least have a patch attached to it, and people could apply that themselves. We wouldn't release without basically a pull request diff of some kind at that point.
Are you concerned at all that that'll get you into the area of having to maintain the patch?
Yes, that is an issue, but yeah, we haven't had to deal with that yet. So I'm just sort of like stretching for, making things up, because we haven't had to deal with that yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't put a whole lot of thought into it.
Interesting.
Hopefully we don't, but
yeah.
I think that we're going to eventually here.
Well, I think we're all hoping that for your sake. So, yeah, does it concern you at all that you'll make a disclosure, people will use the unpatched version and then get exploited because of what you're putting out there? I mean, I come down more on the side of make the disclosure and hopefully it gets fixed, but I am curious about the other side of things.
Well, the point is that we want to offer low friction for package maintainers. So the goal is to provide disclosure to the package maintainer. If we can provide a pull request or a patch for them, they can implement it. And at that point, if we do a disclosure with patch and they haven't accepted it yet, I feel that the community will sort that out in terms of rolling that in. If if there is enough vulnerability behind it, I think that there'll be enough pressure to the community will adopt said version with patch, and then it'll take over from there. I don't know. It's a tough call. I'm sure other communities had to deal with it. I haven't really looked or researched into how that's been dealt with in, say, Ruby gems or anything like that.
You could also use this to squash your enemies.
Oh, man. Good thing Joe's not the head of the Node Security Project.
Or the NSA.
Well, yeah.
Because the guy in charge of the NSA would never do that.
Never. Lots of integrity.
Him.
Lots of integrity.
He looks great. I think he'll do a great job.
Yeah.
Full confidence.
When did we become so political?
I don't know.
2 minutes ago.
Edited it out.
So what about, utilizing all this for education, for developers and stuff like that? I mean, you talked a little bit about that before, but is there some idea of really consolidating this into educating people, getting good education? Because I'll be honest, I think that by and large, a lot of the mistakes that are made now are the same mistakes that were made 10 years ago.
Yep. And we aren't learning a damn thing. And half of it's mistakes and half of it's we're just not learning. We're like, ooh, look at this green field over here. It's Node. Tromp, tromp, tromp. Let's write all of the things. And not bother to look back. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, yes. Education is a huge component of this, and it's part of where I wasn't thinking initially. I was just thinking initially let's audit things, let's disclose them, let's fix them, write a blog post, and education will come from there. Well, we're making education a piece of the sort of audit process now, but we hope to consolidate, because like the Rails has Rails Security Guide, which has some, some stuff around what you should do, and hopefully we can take some of the knowledge from other communities and stick them in sort of a node specific. Hey, you're in JavaScript land. Here's some examples for you, rather than when you say go to the OWASP top 10, you're getting examples about PHP and Java, and nobody gives a crap. So we need examples that are relevant. So yeah, I agree.
So the other question I have then is, like with the Rails Security Guide, a lot of it is don't turn off the built-in security features.
Yeah.
So is there any of that with Node, or maybe an NPM module or two that you can actually go in and say, use this because it will actually turn on a bunch of stuff that you ought to be using?
Yeah. So as an example, like Express, you have to turn on cross-site request forgery protection. It's not a default. Shameless plug, there's a library called Helmet for Express that turns on a bunch of security headers, and you just get those for free then. But there's a lot of things too, like Jade automatically escapes, at least for HTML context, variables to help prevent against cross-site scripting. So that's a good thing. Don't turn that off, right? But when you do that and a template is rendered, there's no warning that gets crapped out that says, hey, you've got to unsanitize template variable bad you or something. Like there's no secure by default's a big thing, and I think that we should be turning that on, and especially in frameworks we're creating. I think the sales guys, Sales.js, are doing have that mentality, and I think that they're doing some cool stuff there. I think Express could shore up some of that stuff. Happy framework from Walmart is awesome. Aaron Hammer, that runs that team, goes so far as to even the examples that he tries to publish, he does things like proper bcrypt, crypting of passwords, and not just doing some shitty example. Like he really wants to get people doing the right things, and so he's taking it that far as documentation and things like that. I have to have good examples.
That's awesome, and that's the first time I've ever heard anybody say anything good about Walmart.
Walmart Labs, they're doing some awesome stuff. Aaron and team.
That's good. It looks cool.
Yeah. Cheap stuff. I like Walmart.
So
that's a good thing said about Walmart.
We got to talk about your stickers. We can't talk about the Node Security Project without those sweet, sweet stickers.
Oh, thanks.
Those are amazing.
Thanks.
Did you come up with the stickers like before you had the security project? Did the stickers lead to the security project?
No. So actually, I made a Twitter account as one of like the first things, and I took the Node logo, the green logo, and I stuck a lock on it, and that was the first iteration. And then one of our designers, or Adam Brault here, saw it, and he's like, "Let's make it blue," So we made it blue, and that's how it stuck.
It looks good.
And of course, I like it. We decided not to put any words on it or anything like that. It just people seem to really like it. So thanks.
You said before the show that putting a lock on stuff makes it secure. So
yeah, it's like the little lock in your browser there. So if it's there, it's more secure.
Or like those sites that just put an image tag with a lock in it.
It's more secure then. Yeah. So nobody will mess with your laptop. You just stick one right on the front. It's locked down.
That's right. I need a lock sticker for my laptop.
Yeah, exactly.
So just to reiterate, the best ways to get involved are to jump into that API repo if you want to help develop stuff.
API repo.
Is that the only place you're really looking for help right now, or?
Yeah. So once we get that sort of shored up, which it's pretty far along, then we got to get the front end piece going, which we'll talk to the API, of course. And the David DM guys have been helping quite a bit on the API when they can, because they want to consume it as well for, say, here's your out-of-date modules. Also, these ones have no security issues, which will be a cool sort of side effect of the project. So yeah, they should jump. You can jump on IRC. I'm not very responsive, but we got a couple other guys from the team that.
What's the IRC channel?
It's on Freenode, and it's just pound node security.
Oh, cool.
How am I ever going to remember that?
I don't know. We make it difficult.
Yeah, why don't you just call it what it is?
Pound node security stickers. Oh, no, that doesn't.
So,
Not yet.
you've kind of talked about the point behind a lot of the stuff that node security is about. Where do you see it going moving forward?
Going forward, basically, I'll stop talking about it all the time and actually do more work on it. which is I just been talking about it nonstop, it seems. But going forward, I'd like to see it get some integration into NPM and just keep refining our process to keep trying to make the ecosystem better, the community better, and push education and meet some of our ocean boiling goals.
Awesome. All right. Well, if people want to learn more about this stuff or get a hold of you, what are the best ways to do it?
Hit me up on Twitter, at Adam_Baldwin, or Node Security on Twitter, or hit us up at nodesecurity.io.
If you just Google Adam Baldwin, that's you, right?
Yeah, certainly. I was on Chuck and Firefly, and
yeah. My most important question is, do you like Firefly?
So I have a confession to make. I had not actually seen it until this last year. And I get like the nerd gasp. But so I was perfectly content not having watched it, and then I watched it, and then I'm like all kinds of pissed off. So basically, but
all kinds of pissed off.
I mean, you don't like it
because that guy stole your name, or
no? Because they can't. It's over, and it was great.
Oh,
you've seen the movie too, right?
Yeah, I haven't watched the movie yet. I've heard I get closure from the movie, but
the movie's great.
You get some closure.
But I do have I have exchanged tweets with Adam Baldwin, so I guess that's my link to glory or something.
That man was born to play that role on Firefly.
So great.
There's really nothing else to say to that.
No.
Yeah.
My sister knitted me a hat. A hat for Christmas.
No. Oh,
yeah,
so
it was a couple
jealous.
years ago. I wear it snowboarding, and I feel super cool.
That's great.
That is.
Yep. So, before we go, does Lyft support you in this, or do you just kind of do it in your own free time? Or, sorry, Lyft Security. I feel like isn't there another company named Lyft?
There's an app.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought that you were the same thing for a while, and I was really confused why this app company would also have like a hardcore penetration testing team.
Yeah, so
Man, that's one secure chat app.
Lyft is for taxi, like the mustache taxis.
There's also a Lyft with a Y.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the
app.
mustache taxis in San Francisco.
Well, anyways.
Yep.
Yes.
We get confused for since it's like Carrot Lift, or it's either Carrot Lift, Uplift.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of variants, but so Lyft is basically a department, if you will, of And Yet, who makes like web apps. So they make web apps, we break web apps, and it's basically just we've got a very small team here. So I'm the lead of Lyft. So of course Lyft supports us, because that's basically what I do. So yeah, Lyft, gives me some time to do that, and And Yet basically sponsors it. Lyft organizes it, and it's community driven. So
very nice. Well, that's cool. Well, we're looking forward to seeing where this goes in the future and all of your community contributions. Thank you so much for putting in the time.
Well, you're welcome. Thanks for having me on the show.
I'm super excited about this. I think it'll be fun. And I also have the secret selfish desire to learn more about security. I know just enough about security to know that I'm bad at it. So
that's okay. So am I. But we can get better.
Awesome.
All right. Well, let's do the picks then. AJ, do you want to start us off with the picks?
Yes, I do. First off, when Adam mentioned that he was from Washington State, that reminded me of how I used to live close to Maine State, and this Canadian Border Patrol video. I don't know what it is. It's like Saturday Night Live skit or something, but it's hilarious. At least I think it is. It's always, like, anytime you're making fun of Canadians, it's a good time. It's basically what Americans live for.
Yeah,
right?
It's hilarious, eh?
That shouldn't have been so funny, but it was. And second, I'm going to pick Frozen and the Frozen soundtrack. Frozen was a good movie. I don't think it was as good as Tangled. Some people think that it is. Olaf the Snowman is an amazing character. His song pretty much makes the movie. He says something like, "The winter time is good to find someone and cuddle, but in the summertime I will be," and then you expect him to say a puddle, but instead he says a happy snowman. And the songs are just cute and fun, and you can listen to them on Spotify, including songs that they produced that are kind of like beta quality. What do we call that in non-computer terms? Rough draft? First cut? I don't know. But they're songs
B-sides?
that never...
Demos?
What? Demos, yeah.
B-sides or demos?
B-sides.
Yeah. So
Count
there's
on
something
Jameson to
Demos,
know
not
the
B-sides.
music terminology.
Thank you, Jameson.
Hey, I was in a crappy band in high school. That gives me authority forever on music.
That's right. You probably did that before 2004, huh?
I sure did. Shout out to our last episode.
Isn't that our next episode?
Oh, shoot. Next episode.
Time warp. Anyway, so they also have songs that weren't included in the movie that are kind of cool songs that also follow alternate plot lines. Apparently they did the music before they finished the storyline. And so there's some songs that kind of give like this window into what the movie might have been. I'm still listening to it. So yeah, I'm going to pick those things picked.
All right. Joe, what are your picks?
All right, so my first pick is the musical group Forte. It's a trio of tenors that was on America's Got Talent this year. They just put out an album that's available on Spotify, and they are just absolutely fantastic. I feel like I'm listening to the three tenors. They're just totally amazing. I love listening to them while I work, so I'm going to pick them. I'm also going to pick the MLS Live subscription service, which is something I've picked in the past. And it's a subscription service where you can watch every soccer game played during the MLS season, but you can watch a condensed 15-minute version of it. So all the really cool action for every game played every week. Of course, the season doesn't start till March, but right now, until the end of the year, they're offering a 20% off. So I figured I'd mention that. The last pick is going to be a shameless plug. My latest Pluralsight course on Angular for .NET developers released today. And so I'm going to pick that. It was a fun course to produce, and it'll be fun to get the feedback from that as well.
Awesome. Jameson, what are your picks?
I just have one because it's kind of a giant one. I just found this blog called affer.com. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's by Kyle Kingsbury, who's a distributed systems guy, and that's a big word that I've always wanted to learn more about. He has this series of blog posts called Jepson. I think that's the series, like he gave the title or something. I don't really understand it. But anyways, it talks about distributed systems, and it walks through a ton of different databases and shows you how they all react to network partitions or to just all the weird things that can happen in distributed systems. And it's amazing. It's kind of mind-blowing to me as I learn more about this stuff. So that's my only pick, just this series of blog posts.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to throw out a couple of picks. So my first pick is something that I just picked up from the Freelancer show about an hour ago, but it's pretty funny. It's clientsfromhell.net, and there's some pretty good ones in there. If you've followed the last couple of weeks of my life, you might understand. Anyway, funny stuff. I've also been listening to this Shark Tank book. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Shark Tank TV show, but basically the idea is that entrepreneurs go in and they pitch their business to these investors who are kind of self-made millionaire, billionaire entrepreneurs, and they all got together, the entrepreneurs that contribute to these businesses or invest in the businesses, they got together and wrote a book together or had somebody write the book and then gave their feedback or input to it. And it's pretty good. It's just general how to build your business advice, and they've got some stuff in there for, different business models and things like that. So I thought it was pretty good. I'm about halfway through it, and I'm really enjoying it. And anyway, those are my picks. Adam, what are your picks?
Let's see. You guys got all kinds of interesting stuff, so I'll have to come up with something here. Of course, I've got to talk security first, right? A great a book pick, I think, would be The Tangled Web by Michael Zalewski. Covers a lot of the stuff like we talked about, historical things and things coming up that you should know about in terms of security. And then I've got a couple of shameless plugs for the team here. One for Talkie.io, which basically you can go to Talkie.io/whatever. You both end up in a WebRTC, video audio call. No plugins, no hassle. It's kind of fun, super easy. And the other shameless plug would be for Human JavaScript. One of my teammates, Henrik Jorteg, wrote that, and I think that it's I'm no front-end JavaScript developer, and it's helped me understand how to build and how to maintain and sort of construct single-page apps on the client side in a sane way. So those are my picks.
Awesome. All right. Well,
I forgot one pick. I got one more plug. I got to plug it again. Mountain West JavaScript Conference.
Yeah, please come. I want to meet you, and Jameson does too.
I was expecting Mountain West Burrito.
No, I don't pick local restaurants because I don't think most of our listeners can go to Mountain West Burrito. But anyways, yeah, the deadline for paper submissions, I think, or presentation submissions is the middle of January sometime. There's still plenty of time to submit. We want to hear from you, especially if you've never talked before. It'll be a great way to get your feet wet, and it'll be awesome. So come.
I thought the call for proposals. Did you say call for proposals or ticket sales?
Call for proposals. Did I say a lie? Is it closed?
I think it's through the end of the year.
Oh, well, cool. There's still time.
They close Saturday, January 4th. So there's the official word.
So that's what you can do over the New Year's.
Yep. Write a proposal. And if you want to hear about something and don't want to speak about it yourself, I am looking for some ideas because I'd like to speak at that one since it's local and stuff. So if it's something that I might know about, tweet me. All right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap this up. Thanks for coming, Adam.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks for coming on.
And thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll catch you all next week.